Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new forecast. Today, we're talking about pretty much this system out here that's currently off of California, rolling off into Nevada at the moment. This will eventually eject off into the Great Plains, but there's something about it. I want to talk here really quickly. It did produce a couple of possible water spouts off of the California coast, but it also produced uh, some tornado warnings. It didn't produce any tornadoes that I know of, but it did spark a couple warnings there in Southern California, and I do think it was around the Los Angeles area. Not exactly one you would see, but what we're keeping an eye on is as it moves off to the east. The main low will be way up here to the north, but there does appear to be a secondary low further to the southwest that's going to eject off into the Great Plains, and it's going to create a jet stream of around 40 to 50 knots, and this is about 18,000 feet up though, and we're going to have multiple storms firing off here, but we'll get to that soon. But right now, the jet stream kind of weird, looks a little weird to me, but we'll see what it does. And going off into tomorrow, we see the much larger storm come out, and this is going to cause some problems as well for eastern Oklahoma, much of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, and pretty much along just west of the Mississippi River. So we're really going to have to keep an eye on this. And then eventually this shifts out, and we may have another storm or two try to come in later October. But we'll keep a very close eye on that. Let's go into temperatures. And right now it's yeah, this is about earlier this morning, but this morning started kind of cool, some mild 60s and 70s, but we're again watching for Friday. This is about 6 o'clock p.m. Oopsies. Now this is about 6 o'clock p.m. Friday. Some you can kind of see where that cold front sits too. But anyways, you can kind of see some 80s here across much of Oklahoma and northern Texas. And kind of the warmer temperatures is where you'll see the higher moisture counts. And going into Saturday, again, you can really clearly see where that gold for. Oops, I'm sorry. That was my bad. Anyways, going into Saturday early morning, again, you can really see where that cold front is, especially as especially when the sun goes down. But eventually it's going to stall again, and tomorrow evening, it may even kind of reverse a little bit, almost. Back up just a tad. We'll keep an eye, very close eye on that. But this is going into Saturday, much higher tornado chances and severe weather chances out in Arkansas, Missouri, and Illinois, and southeast Oklahoma. Keeping a very close on all of that. And then going into Sunday, that cold front smashes down and drags everything off to the east-southeast of the U.S. and the Gulf of Mexico. Let's go to dew points. And already we are seeing kind of a blob of higher moisture here in northeast Oklahoma up to southern Iowa. That's going to kind of disappear and fade out a bit as we go off into Friday. But we do see more of a moisture return as the storm approaches. This is about 6 o'clock on Friday. We may have even storms up in eastern Kansas and even up to Wisconsin off of that cold front, possibly, if any severe storms are able to go off. But again, you can really clearly see where that cold front is right here. That dry line is going to set up here in western Oklahoma. I'll get to the storm modes here in a minute. And eventually going off into Saturday afternoon, that cold front presses down on these storms, and moisture rises again into southeast Oklahoma and Arkansas, Missouri, and that's where chances are going to be higher for storms. And eventually, everything's going to get pushed off to the east southeast. and just look at this just empty mass of nothingness. All that, most of that green is just gone. This will mean, and over here, kind of in the mountainous regions, a lot of snow out there. But all this moisture is going to get shoved off to the southeast. It'll eventually will have more moisture returns later in October, and we may get another tornado outbreak or two. If this shapes up to be a tornado outbreak or any severe weather event, it could shape up to allow for more later on. And I'm not going to use anything on there. Here's precipitation. For this one, I'm going to go and go into the southern plains. Actually, my central U.S. here. There we go. And again, like I said earlier, the cold front's going to set up here in northwestern Oklahoma and southwest Kansas, and there will be a dry line setting up. So right now we're watching up here in eastern Kansas for a more linear storm mode, and down here in Oklahoma we're looking for a more isolated supercellular structure. And the models have been kind of on and off in a way, I guess, about this. But going into later to pretty much here in just a few hours now, actually, we do have a couple of storms kind of firing off that cold front. Maybe a bit more of a linear setup further to the north here, and maybe an isolated cell or two further south. So from central Nebraska down to far northwest Kansas, maybe more of a linear setup. And if anything can stay out ahead of it, maybe an isolated cell or two. Tornado threat is very, very, very low. And it's mostly going to be a wind and hail event, especially wind, especially if this turns more into a linear event. But going again, this is going to quickly dissipate and going off into Friday. Right now, towards the evening hours, nothing right now, but you can clearly see where that cold front is, though. Seeing these storms off in eastern Iowa and northern Missouri. Those could be severe depending on if they can stay ahead of the cold front. But what we're really watching for is this going into Saturday overnight hours. Again, you kind of see what cold front is, presses down on these storms, and we're watching this. Not only this, but any isolated storms that could fire up further to the south on the dry line, and then this will cross Oklahoma City. It's a little difficult to tell, but Oklahoma City Metro will have to watch not these right here, but they're gonna spawn here and go east southeast. So Oklahoma City may need to watch those very carefully as well. And going off into tomorrow, that dry line and cold front are still very imminent. We could see a cell or two down there in northern Texas, south of the Red River. That could be a sign of a supercell, kind of all by itself. But what we're watching for is from eastern Iowa all the way down to southeast Oklahoma is all of this blob of storms. We could have one big supercell, maybe a cluster of supercells. We need to watch all these very, very closely, as these could all be isolated or semi-isolated supercells, and have the ability to produce large hail, damaging winds, and of course maybe a couple tornadoes. But the much higher tornado potential will be out in these storms on Saturday. This is Saturday about 6 o'clock p.m. And then these are going to quickly shift into a linear setup. Here's the low pressure system back there, and the cold front really pressing down on those storms that causes them to stretch out and give them that line. And then once the storm passes, it will be all clear for Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and more. So keeping a very close eye on these storms, obviously. Let's go into Storm Prediction Center. This is today. We have this marginal threat ranging from northern New Mexico all the way up to southwest South Dakota. And there is two small tornado threats, actually. One in far northeastern Colorado and southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. Very low, brief tornado threat there. Wind risk 60, 70 miles per hour, give or take, from about Albuquerque, New Mexico, up to Casper, Wyoming, and far southwest, South Dakota. And for hail, it goes up to Rapid City, South Dakota, down through Cheyenne, Wyoming, Denver, Colorado, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Going into October 16th, we have the kind of showers and thunderstorms going off in eastern Colorado and up to Nebraska. That is what we were looking at a moment ago. And again, very, 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 very low tornado threat. We could potentially see a 2% risk here, like maybe in the morning, but so far it's only going to be a hail risk actually here in from about does include McCook, Nebraska, and Colby, Kansas. Watching all these very closely, wouldn't surprise me if a wind risk does get issued. But what we're looking at is Friday and Saturday. Here's Friday. We have a pretty big marginal risk. We may see a slight risk get issued, especially from about Wichita, Kansas, down to Woodward, Oklahoma, and maybe even Oklahoma City. Watching these storms very closely, though, there won't be a whole lot of instability, but we will have the shear and the spin in the atmosphere. So from about Kansas City, Missouri, down to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, we're watching any of those storms in there to become severe. Maybe even an isolated severe storm or two up in Des Moines, Iowa, or even La Crosse, Wisconsin. Still watching anything on that cold front, anything that can stay out ahead of it. Tornado chances are low, expecting a 2% to 5% chance. And up to golf ball size hail, along with 70 miles per hour wind, give or take, 60, 70, maybe an isolated 75 mile per hour wind gust. And going into Saturday, the much larger risk here from southern Illinois into southern Missouri, southeastern Oklahoma, far northeast Texas, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a chance out into Wichita Falls and Dallas for that isolated supercell that has been kind of popping up there on models for the last several hours. So definitely keeping an eye on this as well, but definitely Arkansas, you're gonna have to watch this because you're like dead center. Little Rock, Memphis, Greenfield, Ville, much higher tornado chance. I suspect a 5%, maybe a little higher, maybe 10%, maybe even an isolated significant tornado or two in there. Depends on what happens. The models have been kind of up and down. We're watching it very closely. Have a good day and stay tuned for any updates.